Okay, let's unpack this. We've all seen the movies. We've probably all read the summary of H.G. Wells's The Invisible Man. But today, we're going so much deeper than just the science fiction of it all. We are doing a pretty intense and chilling psychological autopsy on its main character, Griffin.
Right.
This deep dive is all about what happens to a person's soul, really, when they're given absolute terrifying power.
Exactly. We're moving past the special effects, the floating clothes and the sort of novelty of it.
Yeah.
We're focusing on the true engine of this tragedy, which is the mind of a man who believes he's been granted total impunity.
Right.
If you come to this story looking for a tale about a scientific genius, you'll definitely find one. But if you look just a little bit closer, you find this profound study of what happens when all those societal constraints, the things that keep us moral, are just violently stripped away.
So our source material, The Invisible Man, a grotesque romance. It's less a story about innovation and much more a horrifying character study. We're going to trace Griffin's catastrophic fall from this, brilliant but incredibly arrogant physicist into this isolated tyrannical maniac. I think the core revelation of the whole novel is that invisibility didn't create a monster. It just removed the consequences.
Yes. It peeled back the layers.
It allowed a deeply structurally flawed person to shed his humanity completely.
That's our mission today, really, to dissect that decay. And it seems to be driven by three kind of dark forces that all converge. First, we have to analyze the true villain, which is the deep-seated narcissism and, honestly, sociopathy that was there long before any chemicals. Then we'll look at the psychology of impunity, where invisibility acts like this powerful, immediate drug, convincing him he's basically a god.
And then finally, the total collapse.
The total collapse into what we're calling the isolation madness, where that fantasy of being a god just smashes head-on into the brutal reality of being in exile, turning him into a hunted animal.
It's a tense journey, and we have to start at the very beginning to understand the man before the world stops seeing him. To really get a grip on the Invisible Man's collapse, we have to look back at the Visible Man, at Griffin, and the sheer force of his personality, or maybe his pathology. He shows up in this little village, Iping, on one wintry day through a biting wind and a driving snow. But what's truly staggering is the psychological effort he puts into just hiding himself long before anyone has any idea what his secret is.
It's not just a disguise, is it? It's like an act of constant psychological warfare against his own discomfort. The book says he's literally wrapped up from head to foot.
Yeah.
He's got these thick gloves, a off-felt hat pulled way down, and of course the famous enormous blue spectacles with side lights. He even has a fake bush side whisker to hide the fact that he's an albino, which we find out later.
And just think about the irony of his very first conversation with Mrs. Hall, the innkeeper. He demands a fire in the name of human charity, while being the most uncharitable, hostile person the village has probably ever seen. This obsession with just hiding himself, it forces him to manage this intense irritation, this physical discomfort. It really shows you the extent of his narcissistic need to control everything around him.
And that irritation, it just boils over the second anyone breaches the little boundary he set up.
Yeah.
He rents the room for his private use, demanding absolute total solitude. So when the clock jobber, a guy named Teddy Henfrey, just hangs around a little too long trying to fix the clock, Griffin's reaction is what the book calls painfully suppressed rage.
Just for that.
Just for that. He snaps at him, "Why don't you finish and go?" It's such a massive overreaction to something so normal. But he can't afford for anyone to see his equipment, his chemicals, or maybe most importantly, just the extreme physical cost of what he's done to himself.
And that need for privacy was hiding this immense but profoundly flawed scientific ambition. We get the backstory later when he's confessing everything to Kemp.
Right, in chapter 19.
He was a brilliant mind. He won a medal for chemistry, but he dropped medicine for physics because, in his words, light fascinated me.
And this is where you really start to see the megalomania creep in.
Yeah.
He saw his old professor, Oliver, as a scientific bounder and a thief of ideas.
So it's not just about getting credit.
No, it's about total crushing dominance. He refused to publish any of his findings along the way because he, and this is quote, meant to flash my work upon the world with crushing effect and become famous at a blow.
At a blow, no process.
Exactly. It's not real ambition. It's a pathological need for validation, but only on his own terms. The idea of collaboration or, incremental publishing was just completely beneath him.
Which brings us to the core psychological argument here and one of the main themes of our deep dive.
Yeah.
the chemical process, it just exposed his true sociopathic self.
Yep.
His motivations from the start were just completely and utterly selfish. He admitted he wanted the formula to go from being a shabby, poverty-struck, hemmed-in demonstrator to a being of mystery, the power, the freedom.
And he says, with this horrifying certainty, drawbacks I saw none.
None.
That complete lack of foresight is just terrifying. He sees the world in purely transactional terms. So when he needed money, the last bit of funding to finish the experiment, what was his solution?
Not a grant, not a loan.
No, he confessed. I robbed the old man, robbed my father.
And this is, for me, the most chilling detail in his entire backstory. This is the definitive proof of how broken he was before anything else. Griffin reveals that his father shot himself shortly after he stole the money.
It's not an accident. It's not incidental. It is the cost of Griffin's ambition, paid in blood.
So how did he process this profound human tragedy causing his own father's suicide? What remorse did he feel?
Zero. Absolutely none. He reflects on it and says, I did not feel a bit sorry for my father. He seemed to me to be the victim of his own foolish sentimentality.
Foolish sentimentality.
Yeah.
That phrase right there. That is the defining marker of his villainy.
It's the textbook definition of sociopathy. A total absence of remorse or empathy, coupled with this profound emotional detachment. He couldn't even see his father's grief and desperation as legitimate.
No, it was just a weakness, a flaw in the system that he, Griffin, was trying to escape.
He even remembers being at the funeral, describing the cheap hearse, the scant ceremony, the windy, frostbitten hillside, but he felt a complete sense of detachment. He literally categorized his own father's life and death as really not my affair.
So the theft, the suicide, just collateral damage.
Steps on the ladder in his great pursuit of physics. And this proves, I think definitively, that the chemicals didn't drive him mad. They just empowered a mind that was already profoundly, tragically cold.
The experiment itself was, of course it was ruthless. He first tests the whole process on a living creature, this lean white cat.
Yeah, which he has to drug with opium first. The poor thing, after it's been processed, the only things left are the parts that resist the chemical change. Its claws, and the pigment at the back of its eye, the tapetum.
So what's left is just two little ghosts of her eyes.
It's a horrifying image, and it's a perfect foreshadowing of Griffin's own fate. He is, after all, an albino with these fiery garnet eyes. His reality as the invisible man would always be that of this unnaturally hairless, sight-impaired creature.
So when his landlord in London threatens to expose him, Griffin decides the time is now, he says, vanish. It was irresistible. And his exit from his old life is just an act of complete destructive self-immolation. He burns his house down to cover my trail.
He literally tossed together some loose paper straw and so forth and led the gas to the affair. He destroyed everything, his life, his resources, all of it, except for his 3 research notebooks and his checkbook.
Which shows a complete irreversible break with civilization.
The self-destruction is total. He didn't just walk away, he torched the bridge back. He has nothing left but his power and the clothes on his back, convinced that physics has solved every single one of his problems.
So the moment Griffin steps out onto Great Portland Street, invisible and naked, he enters the psychological state that philosophers have been thinking about for millennia. This is the moment he gets the ultimate drug of anonymity.
Yes.
It's like putting on the ancient Greek Ring of Gyges, which granted invisibility and, by extension, just removed all accountability.
And the whole premise of the Ring of Gyges, which Plato wrote about, is whether a good man would stay moral if he knew he could never, ever be caught.
And Griffin answers that question immediately,
and
violently.
Instantly. His morality doesn't erode slowly. It just evaporates, which proves that his goodness was only ever enforced from the outside.
His first feeling wasn't triumph or, reflection on this incredible scientific achievement. It was just this immediate, raw sense of power. He called it one of exaltation.
He felt, and I'm quoting here, as a seeing man might do with padded feet and noiseless clothes in a city of the blind. He saw himself as elevated, a master among insects.
And that inflated self-image immediately leads to just pure malicious cruelty. He gets this wild impulse to jest to startle people.
But that jest, as you said, it escalates into violence within seconds. Right there on Great Portland Street, he sees a man carrying a basket of soda water siphons. Griffin, laughing out loud, just twists the basket out of the man's hand.
Deliberately causing a crash, just for the chaos of it.
Exactly. This act is fascinating because it is pure, anonymous malice. aggression for entertainment.
If we were going to draw a modern comparison, this is the original internet troll.
It is. He found joy in causing maximum confusion and a little bit of physical distress without any risk to himself. It's low-cost cruelty, which is the definition of anonymous abuse.
Absolutely. He was testing the limits of his new power, and that initial rush convinced him he was invincible. But that illusion of godhood, it gets shattered almost immediately.
And brutally. And by the most mundane things, he just completely failed to account for the weather or for simple human senses.
He realizes pretty fast that he's stark naked and the thin slime of mud that covered the road was freezing. He was cruelly chilled. He catches a terrible cold.
He gets a little cut on his foot, and he's lame, his throat is sore. He couldn't be seen, but he was constantly physically miserable.
And that physical misery just eats away at his sense of superiority. He can't escape the cold or the dirt or the pain. And on top of that, he learns that true anonymity is impossible.
Right, because of the dog. He's chased by this little white dog that runs nose down right at him, and he realizes with horror that the nose is to the mind of a dog what the eye is to the mind of a seeing man.
Every dog he meets becomes a terror.
It's such a huge moment. This brilliant scientist who transcended human vision is immediately brought down by the sense of smell of a common animal.
He learns that the laws of nature are a lot more persistent than he thought. Plus, any contamination, a drop of rain, a flake of snow, or, most disgustingly, undigested food would basically outline him.
Turning him into a watery outline, a glistening surface of a man, a bubble.
So the freedom he wanted required him to be completely still and basically starve to death.
His power trip lasted, what, a few hours, not days? He realizes he needs shelter and clothes, and he needs them now. That desperation leads him to Omnium's, the big department store.
The plan is simple, right? Use it for shelter, food, clothes, and then emerge as a muffled but acceptable figure, ready to start his grand plans.
But his time in there just highlights his impatience and his total lack of planning when he's under pressure. He manages to get pants, a jacket, an overcoat, a hat. He even finds some fake noses and realizes he could make a full disguise. For a moment, he's actually happy.
He settles in for the night.
But the morning comes too fast. And he has these disorderly dreams, which are so psychologically telling. He dreams he's invisible at his own father's funeral, watching, but then he's forced into the grave, invisible and inaudible.
It's this subconscious fear of being overwhelmed, of forces he can't control.
The very forces he was trying to escape. He wakes up, he's immediately spotted by a shop assistant, and the whole thing just descends into chaos. He has to ditch everything.
He's running from police, struggling with a lamb's wool vest that fits a man like a skin. He's panting and scared, and he's lost everything he just stole. The power trip is completely dissolved into failure, frustration, and, being cold.
And that failure just accelerates his turn toward real cruelty. He gets to Drury Lane, desperate for disguise wigs, dark glasses, masks. He finds this costumier shop run by a hunchbacked man.
His plan is just to rob the cash box.
But the shop owner is sharp. He shuts the door in his face and is peering around suspiciously. He has, in Griffin's words, diabolically acute hearing.
And Griffin's reaction here proves that necessity is just an excuse for his violence. He decides the shop owner can't be allowed to expose him, so he immediately escalates to extreme physical assault.
He knocked him on the head with a stool, and then he renders the man completely helpless by gagging him with a Louis Quatorze vest and tied him up in a sheet.
It's not just functional violence, it's brutal overkill.
Designed to ensure silence and to demonstrate his power. And when he tells Kemp about this later, the psychological distancing is just absolute. He defends it. It had to be done.
And when Kemp calls him out for being a thief, Griffin explodes. "You'll call me a thief next. Surely, Kemp, you're not fool enough to dance on the old strings. Can't you see my position?"
He genuinely believes his crimes aren't moral failings. They're just necessary, regrettable inconveniences forced on him by the stupidity of other people. The world is wrong for getting in the way of the great invisible man.
By the time Griffin makes it to Iping, and then later when he's hiding out in Drury Lane, he's completely disillusioned.
Oh, totally. The dream of freedom and omnipotence has curdled into this nightmare of solitude, physical misery, and the constant fear of being felt or detected or betrayed.
He admits to Kemp that he realized what a helpless absurdity an invisible man was in a cold and dirty climate and a crowded, civilized city.
And this is where the isolation madness really takes hold. He wanted power and freedom, but the nature of his power demanded total exile.
The tragedy is that the very thing he sought made human satisfaction impossible. He puts it so heartbreakingly. No doubt invisibility made it possible to get them, but it made it impossible to enjoy them when they are got.
Just think about everything he had to give up. The possibility of ambition or wealth, since he can't handle money in public. And critically, the love of woman.
He's nothing more than a wrapped-up mystery, a swathed and bandaged caricature of a man.
He's a ghost, perpetually cold and uncomfortable, and this constant erosion of his basic human needs just feeds his paranoia and his escalating rage.
And this failure, this realization that the universe didn't make him a god but just gave him perpetual inconvenience, it compounds his pre-existing narcissistic rage. He confesses his temperament is already bad, and he complains that every conceivable sort of silly creature that has ever been created has been sent to cross me.
And notice how the fault is always external, right? It's not his impatience, it's the silly creature crossing him.
And his solution to mere annoyance is it's terrifying. His threat just escalates so quickly. He says, if I have much more of it, I shall go wild. I shall start mowing them.
Mowing him. I mean, that is such an extreme jump from irritation to fantasizing about mass slaughter.
Yeah.
The scientist who's going to revolutionize physics is now plotting genocide just to manage his temper. That is the sound of his internal monologue just completely devolving.
This isolation also meant he desperately needed help, a collaborator, a visible man to handle the stolen money and carry his 3 precious research books.
And that need drives him to Thomas Marvel, a short, fat tramp, who he chooses specifically because he was an outcast like myself, and therefore disposable and easy to bully.
Griffin's introduction to Marvel isn't a job offer, it's immediate psychological abuse.
Oh, absolutely. Marvel is just sitting by the road thinking about his ugly boots, and suddenly flints start appearing out of thin air and hitting his bare toes, making him howl in terror.
He uses the terrifying, inexplicable nature of his power to force Marvel to obey.
After he reveals himself, he shakes Marvel violently and gives him this very clear ultimatum backed up by the pain. You have to be my helper, help me, and I will do great things for you. An invisible man is a man of power.
The promise is the carrot, but the terror is the stick.
And Marvel becomes this tortured psychological hostage, a money box and luggage carrier, enduring constant threats and bruises. When the books get scattered during the mess in Iping, Griffin snarls at him, "On my honor, I will kill you."
And because of Griffin's sociopathy, Marvel's pain, his mental and physical state, is just a tool for control. There's no human consideration there at all.
The Iping meltdown gives us the clearest public view of his functional mania. He gets cornered by Mr. Cuss and Mr. Bunting, and his temper seems to have gone completely at some chance blow, probably when someone bumped into him or stepped on him in the struggle.
And the violence that follows is no longer rational. It's not about getting the books or escaping. The book says he set to smiting and overthrowing for the mere satisfaction of hurting.
It's pure destructive catharsis. He breaks every window in the Coach and Horses Inn. He shoves a street lamp through a window. He attacks anyone nearby. He escapes, having passed out of human perceptions altogether, but he leaves just utter panic and destruction behind.
This is the moment he transitions from using invisibility for selfish gain to using it for just furious, aimless rage.
And when he finally stumbles, wounded and exhausted, to Kemp's house in Port Burdock, he's no longer a mastermind. He's a creature, desperate for survival.
He's feverish, exhausted, and admits he's had no sleep for near 3 days.
He's in pain, he's suffering, and his paranoia is crippling. Even in the house of an old acquaintance, he can't relax. He has a fit of temper and smashes a glass because he forgot this arm and it's sore.
He can't even adjust to his own invisible body. The frustration of his failure is just projected onto everything.
And his fear of being caught is so intense, he won't sleep until he's checked all the doors and windows. The genius is still there, but it's completely secondary to this animal need for self-preservation.
And in a moment of extreme paranoia, he tells Kemp his biggest weakness. He says, "Fool that I am, I've put the idea into your head," realizing he's just armed the one person who might hunt him.
The genius who wanted freedom and godhood is now just a wounded, paranoid animal, terrified of being cornered and exposed. His power has become his curse.
After he recovers a bit at Kemp's house, which is really the last safe harbor of his human past, Griffin's mania doesn't fade. It actually crystallizes into this horrific new ideology.
Yeah, he gives up on the science completely.
And he just embraces total tyranny. He admitted that his initial ambition failed. He says, "Alone. It is wonderful how little a man can do alone."
And he recognizes that the only real use for invisibility in his current state is destruction. He reevaluates the whole advantage of his condition and concludes, so cynically, that it's particularly useful, therefore, in killing.
And then he lays out his tactical superiority in this chilling detail. He can Walk around a man, whatever weapon he has, choose my point, strike as I like, dodge as I like, escape as I like.
Invisibility, in his mind, isn't a scientific breakthrough anymore. It's a license to execute.
And that revelation is the foundation for his new plan for world domination, starting with a local test case.
He declares to Kemp that the Invisible Man must now establish a reign of terror. Yes, no doubt it's startling, but I mean it. He's completely transitioned from scientist to tyrant.
His goal is to terrify and dominate a town like Burdock, issue orders on little scraps of paper, and then kill anyone who disobeys.
This is the final sociopathic break. It's crucial. He has abandoned every human goal, fame, wealth, connection for just raw, murderous control. He's decided that since the world refused to accept his genius, it would learn to fear his power.
Kemp, who is still just trying to process the fact that his old university colleague is a monster, tries to appeal to his reason.
Right. He urges him to publish his results. Don't play this game against the race. But you can't reason with Griffin's sociopathy. He only sees Kemp as a potential tool or an immediate obstacle.
And that attempt to dissuade him leads to the abrupt, terrifying betrayal. Kemp had already called the police, Colonel 80.
When Griffin hears the footsteps on the stairs, he screams, "Traitor!" and immediately starts stripping, desperate to escape before he can be grabbed.
The violence that follows is focused, brutal, efficient. He hits Kemp in the face and neck, throws him to the floor. When Colonel 80 comes up the stairs, Griffin hurls him headlong down the staircase with grip on his throat and a knee in his groin.
This isn't rage, not like before. This is strategic, functional aggression aimed purely at escape.
So, raging and despairing at his intolerable fate, Griffin vanishes again. But his fury isn't satisfied. His ego has been wounded by Kemp's betrayal, and he needs to make a statement.
Which brings us to the horrific Wicksteed murder.
And this murder is so psychologically devastating because it shows the complete senselessness of his new rule. Mr. Wicksteed was just an inoffensive man walking home.
He was attacked near a gravel pit with an iron rod that Griffin had dragged from a fence. The struggle was desperate, and Wicksteed's head was smashed to a jelly.
Let's really analyze why this happened. It wasn't necessary for escape. It wasn't for theft. The hypothesis in the book is just chilling.
It suggests that Wicksteed might have just noticed the iron rod moving by itself and followed it out of curiosity, or maybe he just stumbled upon Griffin accidentally.
Driving the already wounded Invisible Man into a corner by some stinging nettles.
Which means the murder was driven by nothing more than irritation. It was an intensely egotistical and unfeeling outburst of murderous rage against a mundane obstacle. A man died because he was curious and inconvenienced a tyrant.
The fact that Griffin abandons the rod right after suggests the whole thing was just cathartic. It provided a temporary release. He's no longer a strategic villain. He's a force of nature driven by pure, petulant rage.
The next day, he makes his formal, megalomaniacal declaration of war. He sends a letter to Kemp announcing the first day of the terror. The target is chosen. A man named Kemp. Death starts for him today.
The tone is at the absolute peak of his narcissism. He's setting himself up as a god. Port Burdock is no longer under the Queen. It is under me, the Terror. This is day one of year one of the new epoch, the epoch of the Invisible Man.
He truly believes he could rewrite the rules of society just through fear.
And the destruction of Kemp's house that follows, smashing every single window with an axe and flints, that wasn't about necessity. It was performance art. It was a demonstration of terror aimed at satisfying his own wounded ego and establishing his tyrannical regime through sheer spectacle.
Griffin had declared himself the hunter, ready to start his reign of terror. But thanks to Kemp's quick thinking and proactive organization, the Invisible Man immediately became the hunted.
Kemp used the specific weaknesses Griffin had confessed to right against him. He made sure food was locked up and secured, and that the whole country was astir day and night.
This shift in dynamic is immediate, and it's overwhelming. The town, now armed with knowledge of his weaknesses, becomes his prison.
And the desperation of that final chase really shows how quickly his godhood vanished. Kemp is running, deliberately crossing raw flints or bit of broken glass to injure the invisible feet he knows are following him.
Griffin, the once arrogant mastermind, is reduced to being chased across rough ground, his vulnerability to physical pain exploited by his old colleague. His own hubris, confessing his weaknesses, leads directly to his downfall.
The final confrontation is just. It's violent, it's undignified, and it's terrifying. He gets cornered by a group of navvies and a tram crew, and he finds himself in the middle of this chaotic, disorganized mob.
The struggle is described like a savage game of rugby football. The Invisible Man, the self-proclaimed god of a new epoch, is reduced to the sound of desperate survival. He's screaming, "Mercy! Mercy!" as the crowd just beats him into submission.
That cry for mercy is the ultimate, heartbreaking admission of his failure as a human being. In those final moments, he realizes he is not exempt from consequence.
He's just a naked man being beaten to death by angry laborers.
And in the very moment of his death, the invisibility process, which was apparently sustained by living tissue, reverses. As his life drains away, the change goes backward.
The visibility starts slowly at his hands and feet and creeps along his limbs to the vital centers. It's a gruesome, slow, public unwinding of his grand experiment.
The body, when it's finally visible, is described as naked and pitiful on the ground, the bruised and broken body of a young man, about 30.
And the public's shock is intense. He had the white hair and garnet eyes of an albino, but his expression in death wasn't one of remorse or even satisfaction. It was one of anger and dismay.
The final verdict from the crowd is so visceral and so damning. Cover his face. For God's sake, cover that face.
The sight of the monster revealed as this vulnerable, pathetic, human bruised, beaten, and exposed is just too much for them. The legend of the Invisible Man dies, and the tragic image of the flawed Griffin remains.
But the story doesn't end there, does it? The epilogue is maybe the most chilling part of the entire book because it focuses on the dark legacy left behind.
Right. Thomas Marvel, the abused accomplice, he managed to keep the money he was carrying for Griffin stolen from banks and shops.
Lawyers tried to claim it as treasure trove.
But Marvel got to keep it. And he successfully transitions into this surprisingly successful landlord, a little inn near Port Stowe.
And Marvel holds the ultimate terrifying secret. When he's questioned, he confirms he does not have the books, but he knows exactly where they are hidden. His cunning, self-interested silence protects the formula.
And the novel leaves us with this image. Marvel, fat and comfortable, sits dreaming. The book says he blinks through his smoke across the room at things invisible to other eyes. And he mutters to himself, "Once I get the haul of them, Lord."
The genius died, but the power itself is still out there, hidden, protected by the cunning silence of a greedy accomplice. Which means the potential for this dark power is still active in the world, just waiting for the next narcissist, the next brilliant but utterly selfish mind who might succeed where Griffin failed. Wells just leaves the danger lurking.
You know, the real tragedy of Griffin is that he achieved his greatest scientific triumph, a feat of nature that should have changed the world. But he found that his absolute power just mandated a life of isolation and unrelenting cruelty.
He wanted fame and freedom, but what he got was constant fear, ending up naked and beaten on a pile of sharp rocks.
His failure wasn't scientific, despite all the physical setbacks. It was fundamentally catastrophically moral. The experiment didn't drive him mad, it just acted as a catalyst.
It empowered his pre-existing, utterly selfish lack of empathy until he was hunted down like the animal he chose to become.
Exactly. Invisibility didn't make him a god, it made him nothing, stripped of all human connection and all consequence.
It's a powerful story that uses science fiction to really critique human nature itself. Wells shows us that morality isn't an internal virtue for people like Griffin. It's just a habit enforced by the threat of being seen and caught.
So as you walk away from this deep dive into the dark psychology of Griffin, consider this final provocative thought. What is the truly terrifying lesson of the Invisible Man?
Is it the power of invisibility itself, or is it the absolute certainty that such power, once acquired, inevitably strips away the last vestiges of human compassion? What constraints, if any, would remain on your own morality if you knew absolutely that you could never be seen again?